Okay, so speaking of companies and best practices, so some companies build their own builders. Why should you or shouldn't you do that? Thoughts, pros and cons.
Yeah, it's actually a pretty common thing to do with email for good reason in some cases. One, it could be a side effect of how these editors work, where they run into limitations and they realize that they need something more specific to the way they do their design, to the way their workflow works for their email production. And so they could do that. They either sort of build like a step-by-step form where your team could go in and fill out the exact details that they need for an email. The form is submitted, and then it gets either automated in some way, or it just works as a more efficient way for the email producer, whether it's a coder or somebody specifically producing it, to put together all the information without having to run around and gather all that information. The other way that it's done is that some teams would use like an open source editor. Even something like WordPress has a thing where you could like add a plugin or something and make it work for email. It's kind of a hacky way to do it, but there's different tools out there, different open source editors that you could use in-house that you could set up and then sort of like make it work around your email needs. The only downside of that would be that a lot of those editors work similar to the builder editors, where you have all these options and that you might have too many options.
Okay.
You might have flexibility to where you could customize it around your template, but it just might not be again, it goes back to the thing of you might not be able to set certain guidelines, you might not be able to set certain limitations because you're kind of like having to work around the way this open source editor works. So there might be some limitations there as well.
Gotcha. So there are tools that exist that pretty much cover all the bases, is basically what you're saying.
Yeah, and the other thing with in-house editors is that you have to still maintain them.
Right.
Anytime you even with like a WordPress, right? You have to update it for either potential bugs or certain updates that you might want.
Yeah, and sometimes the update breaks it.
Yeah, right. So you got to maintain it, and that's something that you might not want to do like as part of your role.
Right.
Not to mention how you set up. Sometimes you got to set up the server and you got to maintain the server. Figure out hosting, that kind of stuff.
I mean, especially if that's not your main product, right? If you're a company,
exactly.
I worked in IT for a while. I mean, you're a coder. Everybody's got their little tools that they build sometimes, and they're fun and they're cool. Everybody's got their own little workflows, little things. And it's one thing to do that. It's another thing to make that a part of your production, your actual workflow. So, the closer something gets to affecting sales, when you have to really have a critical eye on something, if you're you got a little Linux tool that helps you, run different server operations, that's a different story than something that's controlling your marketing. So definitely, I like your approach. Take a look at these tools out there. Blockset is a great tool. There's other great tools out there. So, okay. One thing next on the list here is we have something that I want. Can you talk about machine learning in Blockset?
It's something we've thought about for Blockset, and it's something that we could do in relation to content. Again, because we're very focused on content and design as well. There's a lot of aspects that we want to eventually do that helps with that process. So something like, and this is something that's been looked at lately is, for example, improving your subject line, right? Because of the way you could enter in your content in Blockset, there may be ways that we could then recommend different types of subject lines. Based on best practices, what is a good subject line to have for your particular email? We could base it on the content itself. We could base it on, you entering in a subject and then, showing you ways that you could improve it. Right now, we only have certain things that like help you basically just look at what you might be missing in your content. For example, making sure that you have your alt tags in, that kind of stuff. But eventually we'd like to get to a point where it's more advanced, where you could have some of these useful tools to be able to help you write better content.
Auto-generating AI type stuff. Okay. I've been seeing some of that stuff pop up, in different like auto-generating AI text stuff, and
Yeah.
you could like even specify that for each audience, right? Like you could have an audience as a variable, and you have different subject lines for different audiences, people in different, customer avatars, that type of thing. You could get real specific with it, couldn't you?
That's true. Yeah. And within the content, you could use, for example, we have a feature right now where you could use code from your email provider to do things like if-then statements, so that you could say, show this piece of content if, my customers are currently active or something, or like different aspects of how you segment your different audience. You could then show different types of content for them specifically.
That's where things are going, man. Machine learning, AI, that's some exciting stuff. Okay, so to wrap it up, I wanted to hit this question I saw that was posted actually today on the Email Geeks Slack channel. So it's, this might be, a little out of scope of what we're talking about. Maybe this is, kind of an intro to the next episode. But I'm just going to read this question. It's almost like like someone venting a little bit on the frustration of like communication between, the coding team and the design team. So I want to know your thoughts on this. So here it goes. So the user writes, "Don't you love it when your team asks you to design an email template?" Templates in quotes. So you clarify that they mean a template like building blocks that we can save for layout purposes and replace the text with actual copy. And you ask them what type of components they want, and they say product focused. Then you build a template based on what you imagine to be a product focused template with placeholder copy, since you've asked them and they didn't provide any, and they ask you to send them a test email. So you send them a test email and they say, overall, there is a lot going on. So we have to remove this, and we have to remove this, and this is not what we need for our welcome email.
Right.
Okay.
So, I mean, I just see all kinds of brain cells evaporating and friendships crumbling and perhaps many cups of coffee needed.
Yeah, it is one of those, what that sort of touches on is the aspect of templates and how those are used, where some people might not completely understand that separation from like a template to a campaign creative. So it sounds like what they're essentially asking for is just like a simple welcome email that they called the template, that they wanted to then modify copy from, versus an actual full-blown template, which is the idea of having these modular components of building out multiple types of email, including a welcome email. So in the case of this designer, what they did is they built out these different modules that work from to be a product-based email, right? And it turns out that they didn't need all those modules for that specific welcome email, but it could be used for other emails. That's sort of this modular template approach is one is what Blockset is based around. It's based around the idea that you have these preset components that you can use for multiple purposes. But then, yeah, sometimes it could be, and it's also a good way to go, because what you do is you also develop a library of patterns that you can reuse. And so it keeps your emails consistent. It keeps you, again, focused on brand guidelines and sort of maintaining a consistent look and feel to your design. And then it makes it easier to produce the emails. So in the case of this person, they would have those components, and then when they need other emails besides the welcome email, they could then take those other components and use them in it.
Gotcha.
And yeah, like you said, this could be a topic that we focus on just about modular templates and the way modular templates work.
Yeah.
Why it's better to design that way, why it's better to code that way as well, because it just makes the overall process more efficient. And it goes back to the design quality and just getting better quality for your design.
I love that. And it seems like, having a grasp on the kind of nuances of these different types of templates versus, like pre-made email. It seems like there's kind of a fine line if you really don't know how to, separate between these things. It's easy to see where confusion can come in because at the end of the day, it seems like they want a welcome email,
right.
but a welcome email template, that's like, it means different things to different people, right? So, so it just, I think there's definitely aspect of just communication there, inter skill set communication, right? Because it's like, if you have a coder, they're going to communicate a certain way, then a designer, then a sales guy, then an executive. So,
and
it's
why it also helps to understand the way some of these editors work, like we talked about, like having a better idea of the different types of tools available and how they work with these templates,
right?
And how they work with design, how they work for your workflow needs, all these different things. It's just useful overall to understand this, so that in that particular case, you could figure out the right thing to do, basically.
Gotcha. So this is like kind of a teaching moment almost. It's very frustrating because you think you're communicating right, but at the end of the day, sometimes there needs to be some teaching communication and say, oh, this is what I thought you wanted. What you're asking for is this, but this is what it's hard. It's not easy.
Well, and that's actually the idea of us discussing this, right? And like the podcast, right? Is that you kind of hopefully, we can help out with that, I guess.
100%. All right. Well, Ovi, it's been great. I think this is a good conversation. Many more to come, and hopefully, I think we really dug in and gave people an idea of the difference and the options in editors and builders. So until next time, I'm Jordan Aldiviez with E.M.U Podcast, Email Marketing Understood. Hope you understand email marketing just a little bit more, and we'll talk to you later.